With our plans all drawn, it's time to start construction. We're going to drill some holes, get the heavy hardware in place, and build our tri-beams. What you got?
Screws and stuff? I don't know.
Hold this. Hold it up next to your arm. Alright, let's take it to the woods.
Do that again.
When you're drilling the holes in your tree, you don't want to drill any further than you have to, so to find out how deep, take the length of your bolt, subtract out your beam, and then any spacers you're going to use. In our case, 15-inch bolt, 3.5-inch wide beam, and a 3/4-inch spacer, so just under 11 inches.
Step of the treehouse. This is really exciting.
You really want to make sure these holes are straight and level, so take the time to use a level, and we used our guideline between the two trees to make sure that this thing is not going to be crooked or up and down. In my case, the drill I started with was not quite powerful enough and only got about halfway into the tree. That was a 5-amp drill, and it just didn't quite get the job done. So I ended up having to go to the local tool rental shop and rent a 90-degree angle drill with a little bit more power, and that took care of it.
Thumbs up.
Of course, putting a depth marker on your drill bit is only good if you stop when you get to that depth marker. I went a little bit too far on this one.
Apparently this is gonna be what's holding up my life.
We decided to go with the 1.25-inch, 15-inch long lag bolts. A lot of people go with the tree tabs, but when I calculated the weight that was going to be in our tree house, it just didn't make sense to have that extra expense. I think that these lag bolts are going to be more than enough. Make sure that before you start to actually install your lag bolt or your tab that you have all your brackets and spacers already on there.
And that was the hard part.
I had heard a lot of people talk about how hard it was to install these bolts or tabs into the trees, and I was expecting a hard time of it, but I was underprepared. You should definitely set aside some time and some extra people if you can. Pull her down! We got these things in the trees about as far as we could and we're about to give up, but luckily my brother Ben showed up with an extension bar for our ratchet, and that got the job done. That's the way. This is much better. Even with a 4-foot extension bar, this still took some muscle. But in every challenge there's a lesson to be learned, so the kids got a free physics lesson in the power of leverage. There you go. Grab the end of the pipe. Nice. Nice. After some blood, sweat, and tears and a little bit of leverage, we had 2 solid bolts in the tree to serve as kind of the foundation for the treehouse. And Once the lumber arrived, we could start building our tri-beams and putting something up in the tree. Start our tri-beam build by making some notches in our primary beam.
Hopefully that's right.
There's a really great tutorial on YouTube from Treehouse Supplies that has kind of the measurements and the principles behind making these tri-beams. Ours is a little different from theirs because we're using 4x4s for the braces and they use 4x6s. Try to hold it flat up against that board. And then go ahead and check it. Once the notches are in the primary beam, the next step is to cut the ends of your braces so that they fit into the primary beam notch that you just made. Like I mentioned, there's some ideas on Treehouse Supplies video on how to do this, but I'll show you a quick version here. Once you have your notches cut and the ends of your supports cut, you want to make sure that everything fits together. Found an easy way to do this is to put your primary beam on 2x thick wood, then put one brace on 4x thick wood and the other brace flat on the ground on a flat surface. That way you can get a pretty good idea of if everything fits because it overlaps. Then you can come down to where your braces intersect and mark those off so that we can make our rabbit cut. This is a little bit different than Treehouse Supplies design. They use a metal bracket to join their braces at the bottom, but to cut down costs a little bit, we're going to go with a rabbit joint instead. Then we use a reciprocating saw just to cut off the excess ends on the 4x4 braces. Now where we had measured where our intersection was of our 4x4 braces, we're going to start making our parallel cuts for our rabbit joint. And you do this by just making cuts at exactly half the depth of the board. And you make them pretty close to each other, as close as you can, maybe a 1/4 inch apart. Just keep on making those lines until you get to the end of your board. Then you just take a hammer and knock out all the little pieces you had notched with your saw. This part's always satisfying. Just to smooth things up a little bit, then I took a wood chisel and knocked out some of the bigger chunks that were left. Beautiful. If you are brave and you want to check yourself, if you did everything perfectly, where your beams intersect at the bottom, you should have a 90-degree angle. And where the supports intersect the primary beam at the top, you should have a 45-degree angle. Not too shabby. One last check to see how accurate we were. The midpoint of your primary beam should be exactly where your beams intersect. So we were about 2 inches off from perfect here.
What you got? You got one of the boards?
With all the pieces of the tri-beams cut and prepped and made sure they fit together, we just had to carry them back to the woods and get ready to put them together and put them up in the trees. Before you start attaching everything, it's a good idea to lay it out one more time just to make sure everything fits like it should. For attaching the braces to the primary beam, we're going with 2 different fasteners. A 6-inch lag screw at the more narrow section, and then an 8-inch timber lock screw a little further down. Really the only reason we're using the 2 different fasteners is just because I already had the 6-inch lag screws. Figured why buy extra hardware if I already have something that's going to work. pre-drill your holes for your lag screws. You want to go with a drill bit that's a couple sizes smaller than the actual diameter of the lag screw. But for these timber lock screws, you don't need to pre-drill at all. I have to say they're a pretty satisfying piece of hardware to use. They sink into the wood really well, and not having to pre-drill is a plus. Once the braces are attached at the top, it's time to connect them and drill your hole at the bottom. You want to make sure you find the exact center where these two beams intersect, especially in our case because we're using 4x4s, and our hole that we're going to drill is going to be 1.25 inches. We really want to have it in the center so we can maximize the amount of wood on either side of the hole on each beam.
I like to try to put one hand on top of there so you can push down with that. Yeah, a little more. Yeah, perfect.
Once we put a screw in place to hold our two beams together, we can drill our hole through the beams for our primary lag bolt to pass through. In this case, I'm using 1.25 inch drill bit as opposed to the 1 1/8 we use in the tree, because we want the lag bolt to pass through these beams as opposed to really digging in like it does in the tree. One more check just to see if we're still square. Looking pretty good. We went ahead and installed one additional little metal 90-degree angle brace just to hold things snug down at the bottom. Once you got your two tri-beams built, it's time to hoist them up in the tree. This is another time it's good to have some friends and family over to help with the heavy lifting, especially if some of your other helpers are sleeping on the job. Position the center of the beam right over your lag screw and secure it with some structural screws.
Spacer against the tree, washer, boards, washer, head of the bolt. Like that.
After you level your primary beam, mark the spot of the hole on the tree and then drill. Just like your top holes, you don't want to go any deeper than you have to, so make it nice and level and mark your drill bit for the depth. This time we were smart enough to start with the extra length bar, so we had that leverage to begin with. By the time we got to the fourth and final lag bolt, we were even smart enough to put some soap on the threads. And this was definitely the easiest of them all. Wish we'd done this on all of them. 2 tri-beams and 4 lag bolts, and we now had a solid foundation to build our treehouse on. A little later on in the build of the treehouse, as I was starting to put more weight up into the platform, I started to wonder if maybe I should reinforce these braces just a little bit. I leveled, then attached a piece of scrap 2x10 to the braces, and then marked where the angles were. Then I took it down off the braces and cut those angles out with a circular saw. From there, I just had to level it back up and attach it back to the braces with some structural screws. This gave me just a little bit more peace of mind from my 4x4 braces twisting or bending or cracking when it has significant weight put on the edges of the treehouse. Next up, it's time to start assembling the subfloor.